Open for business. A warm welcome back for customers as England unlocks.
Take your seats. Have your first drinks. Please come down.
Some pubs let drinkers in just after midnight as thousands queued for long overdue haircuts and the first shopping trip in months.
Let's get some trainers. Come on.
How much do you miss the shops?
I've been dying to come here.
Staycations are also back on. So is this the start of a bumper summer for business? Also tonight, David Cameron in the spotlight. The government investigates the former Prime Minister's efforts to influence ministers. And remembering Grandpa. William and Harry paid tribute to Prince Philip's sharp wit, charm and mischievous sense of fun.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. There is a real sense of relief for millions of people tonight, with many of the tough restrictions in place for months finally lifted in England and Wales. Shoppers queued around the block in freezing temperatures as stores opened their doors for the first time in 4 months. And it was the same for drinkers, eager for a pint, with some outside pub gardens waiting for the stroke of midnight. This is the scene this evening in Newcastle upon Tyne, where people are still milling around the city centre. And it's busy in the centre of London too. In Norwich, hairdressers are opening late to fit in all their customers. And at a beer garden in Cheshire, where pub goers are finally enjoying a drink at their local. Also, holidaymakers have been able to get away after rental cottages open up. We'll have more on that a little bit later. But first, Paul Davis and what could be the light at the end of the tunnel.
3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, take your seats. Have your first drinks.
1 minute past midnight and regulars at the Kentish Bell in Bexley Heath enjoy a welcome back pint sitting on the pavement.
Cheers. It's great, it's really great, and more than anything, for businesses to survive through all of this, I think that's the real happiness in getting this place back up and running again.
We've got an order.
It was a similar scene at the Showtime in Huddersfield, where bad weather was not going to spoil this party.
Oh yeah, it was snowing earlier, but I was still going to come out. Just put the coat on.
Hi, come in. Thank you.
Some hairdressers began making house calls just after midnight. But it was at the start of normal business hours that across the country the shutters were going up to mark a significant step towards normal life after so many months of lockdown. If the queues were anything to go by, the easing of restrictions were more than welcome.
Let's get some trainers. Come on.
How much do you miss the shops?
I've been dying to come here.
These shoppers had waited for hours for the Primark store in Bristol to open. These were queuing in the cold for the same store at the other end of the country in Sunderland, prepared to wait after months of shopping online.
I'm happy to get back in the store, prefer the old-fashioned way, me.
At 6:10 I got here and I came for eyelashes for my wife.
Well, she's fully booked now until the 29th of April.
Hairdressers have been swamped with bookings.
It's great to see everybody. Everybody's excited to be back, slightly nervous if I'm honest. But it all just comes straight back after so many years in the job.
While the reopening of shops and pubs has undoubtedly lifted the mood on the high street, there are still many businesses who are unable to participate in this gradual return to normality. The licensed trade industry, for instance, says more than half its members have to remain closed.
The owner of the White Swan in St Albans knows he'll probably lose money with just a handful of outside tables, but has opened anyway.
Short term, I don't see any profit coming back at all, but people need to know that there's some sort of life coming back into the society, and we have to start somewhere, and this is the start.
This start has also seen the reopening of indoor swimming pools and gyms. Zoos have been welcoming back visitors, while non-essential travel between England and Wales is once again permitted. There's a way to go yet, But it is progress and it is being celebrated tonight. Paul Davis, ITV News.
So let's take a closer look then at England's lockdown easing. And among those who have reopened are non-essential retailers, hair and nail salons, libraries and community centres, and most outdoor attractions. Well, as we've seen, pubs and restaurants are also back open, but only for outdoor table service. And gyms and leisure centres are open too. Among the other big changes, you can now stay in self-contained accommodation, such as some campsites and holiday lets. The number allowed at weddings, receptions and funeral wakes has risen to 15. And care home residents can now have 2 regular indoor visitors. But some things have remained unchanged. Households still can't mix indoors, and outdoors, the rule of 6 or 2 households is still in force. And the encouragement remains to minimise travel and to work from home where you possibly can. Well, both the hospitality industry and retail have been looking forward very much to this day for weeks after suffering crippling losses whilst being forced to close over the winter. Tonight, Ben Chapman is in a pub garden in Cheshire and our business editor Joel Hills is on a high street in Portsmouth. Well, first to Ben in Swettenham in Cheshire. So what's the mood where you are tonight then?
Jolly, I would say, in a word. This is the Swettenham Arms, and what a glorious spot it is to enjoy an evening meal or a drink to celebrate this extra slice of freedom. I'd love to say that the warm welcome here is matched by the temperatures tonight, but it is a little on the nippy side, and so these canopies, which the owners have spent £5,000 to hire for the next few weeks, are coming in useful. They have to be open on 2 sides to comply with the rules, which makes them great for ventilation, but it does make a slightly chilly dining experience. But they've put burners in to provide a little bit of extra warmth, and the people I've spoken to are just relieved, frankly, to be able to come out again, to socialise over a drink, to enjoy somebody else's cooking for the first time in a few months. As for the owners, well, they hope that these measures that they've put in place will encourage people just to have the confidence to come back, to support their industry, to support their business. They've got 80 people booked for this evening, and they hope that people will take up their invitation to eat out, which is quite literally what we're going to have to do for the next few weeks at least.
All right, Ben Chapman, have a good evening. Pace yourself, won't you? And to Joel Hills in Portsmouth. So, Joel, a huge surge in the number of people at the shops today, of course, but it's not all good news, is it?
Well, look, there are plenty of signs of pent-up demand here. They're still queuing outside Primark. There are queues on the other side of the road outside JD Sports. But a reminder, Mary, top man Burton hasn't come back. Neither has Debenhams. There are holes appearing in the high street, and people who've come back into the city centre have found it much changed. A normal downturn, you would expect new retailers to spring up like spring flowers and fill gaps in the high street. That's unlikely to happen this time around because during lockdown our shopping habits changed dramatically. It would appear that they've changed for good, to the great advantage of online retailers like Amazon and the great disadvantage of more traditional retailers who in many cases will find that they've got more space than they need. So in the months ahead, as furlough support is wound back along with business rates relief, expect more shops to shut, expect more companies to fail. But remember that the high street was up against it long before coronavirus arrived. Lockdown has turned a gentle decline into a short, sharp shock. Communities everywhere, here in Portsmouth, across the UK, the shop isn't the asset it was, and communities are going to have to reinvent themselves.
OK, Joel Hills in Portsmouth, thank you. Well, thousands of holidaymakers in England were straight out of the blocks today with the reopening of self-contained rental homes. New ITV News figures show that cottage bookings are more than double what they were before the pandemic, with people desperate to get away to top destinations like Cornwall, Devon and North Norfolk. And our consumer editor, Chris Choi, is in North Norfolk for us tonight. Chris.
On Great Yarmouth's golden shoreline, at last they are back. Some of the very first holidaymakers in England 2021.
And at last you're on holiday. How does it feel?
It feels brilliant, doesn't it, guys?
Yeah. That we're all together, we're away from home, finally, after such a long lockdown.
It's fun to go away and actually not be in our house.
Only self-contained accommodation open today, and you can only go away with your own household or support bubble.
You've had to be realistic with people about their expectations because not everything can open, can it?
Ordinarily, we'd have games in the swimming pool, so we can't do that. So the body zorbing, where people are bouncing into each other, all that sort of interactive entertainment for the children, we're not able to do at this present time.
Holiday accommodation is under pressure, with cottage bookings up 120% on 2019 for July and August. One national firm told us its reservations for April leapt 58% on the day reopening was confirmed, and camping sites report a 139% rise in peak summer bookings compared to 2019.
Ellie, this house is massive.
It's a scramble for staycations.
Say this year it's really ramped up to a new level. I've got a cancellation list, people that are desperate to come and I just can't fit them in. And I have people phoning me up to check that I'm going to honour the bookings I've got.
Morning.
As tourism in England begins this long-awaited bounce back, here COVID marshals were offering friendly advice.
Make sure that their tables are the right spacing, they've got footmarks, they're all aware of if they have a QR code, making sure that they are following the COVID rules.
Our bucket and spade economy is worth billions, and now after the dark days of lockdown, today things began to look much brighter. Chris Choi, ITV News, Great Yarmouth.
Well, Wales has today reopened its borders as the next phase of its lockdown exit plan begins. People are going to be able to travel within the UK and to Ireland, the Channel Islands and the Isle of Man. And non-essential shops are also open there, along with close contact services like beauty salons and nail bars. And all children are back at school, and universities are welcoming students back for a mix of online and in-person lectures. Well, Charanpreet Kaira is in Cardiff for us tonight. So, Charanpreet, has it been a busy day there? What's been going on?
It's been a very busy day here in Cardiff, and indeed it's been busy up and down high streets here in Wales as non-essential shops opened up here for the first time since December. Now, people have been enjoying that here in Cardiff. I was here at 9 o'clock this morning. Some of the queues got started at 6 o'clock. It was busy then and it's busy now. Some shops have been making the most of that by extending their opening hours into the evening. And of course, they've been having to limit the numbers that go in at each time to keep people socially distanced and safe indoors. So a taste of normality then in retail, but pubs are not open here yet. It'll be another 2 weeks before outdoor hospitality can get going here in Wales. And gym goers are going to have to wait until the 3rd of May before they can restart their fitness regimes. So shoppers here enjoying that little taste of freedom, albeit limited, as Wales starts to open up again.
Charanpreet Kaira in Cardiff, thank you. Well, in Northern Ireland, the instruction to stay at home has been replaced with a stay local message instead. The last remaining pupils have returned to school, and groups of 10 from 2 different households can meet outside. Outdoor markets have reopened, and outdoor training can resume for recognised sports clubs in groups of up to 15. Scotland too has seen all children back in the classroom today, but many restrictions won't be eased for another fortnight or so when gyms, shops and hospitality venues are expected to reopen. And there's more about what's changed across the UK from today on our website. If you want to check it, that's itv.com/news. So what impact will today's easing of restrictions have on the number of cases of COVID? Could it undo months of work to curb the spread of the virus? And our science editor Tom Clark is here to explain what could happen. This is all lovely, seeing people out and about, but how careful should we be?
In theory, and this is as far as they really are going, outdoor activities, even if it's that meeting up, drinking outside, shouldn't make a big impact. If we wear our masks, do social distancing as we go into non-essential shops, that shouldn't drive up transmission as well. But we don't really know. It's the honest answer. Ask any of the experts, they will tell you this. We still remember dealing with this new variant of the UK virus, which we know is a little bit more transmissible. We haven't really seen that off the leash, so to speak, since we first started to impose sort of level 4 restrictions before Christmas. Now, on the good in the good news camp, schools went back, we didn't see a significant rise in cases as a result of schools. Cases have come down really nicely in England. They've sort of stayed pretty much flat. That's in a way quite encouraging. Combine that with this opening up, we might see a jump. The really big thing, and the thing everyone's going to be watching for in terms of the advisors to government here, is do we see that translating into hospitalisations and deaths? We hope that's very unlikely, given the success of the vaccination campaign. So basically, if people do what they're told and do keep their distance and don't shout at each other too much across crowded pub tables, and if the vaccination programme stays on track and people go and get their vaccine when asked, we should be in good shape. But basically, we have to wait and see what happens and then review come the next step.
So a fair few ifs there, Tom, but thank you.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, no, that's all right. That's fine. And later in the programme, we will have a special look at England's hairdressers. And
What a nice treat to go out and just, the first thing you do is get your hair done and you feel good.
Not me yet. Why so many people feel such relief at being able to get a trim. But first, it was the turn of the Duke of Edinburgh's grandchildren today to pay their respects to the man they called Grandpa. The Duke of Cambridge and the Duke of Sussex were united in their admiration for the 99-year-old's life. Prince William described him as an extraordinary man with a mischievous sense of humour. His brother, Prince Harry, recalled his sharp wit and legendary banter. Our royal editor, Chris Shipp, reports.
He had been there through the good times and the hardest days, wrote Prince William today, as both he and Prince Harry released their own personal tribute to their grandpa they lost last week. William's tribute came with a new photo of a 2-year-old Prince George in Norfolk in 2015, when his great-grandpa picked them up in his carriage. A statement from the Duke of Cambridge read, "My grandfather was an extraordinary man and part of an extraordinary generation. Catherine and I will continue to do what he would have wanted and will support the Queen in the years ahead. I will miss my grandpa, but I know he would want us to get on with the job." Afterwards, a statement came separately from Prince Harry. He referenced how both he and his grandfather held the honorary position of Captain General of the Royal Marines. Harry remembered both the military man and the family man, his grandpa. "To me," he wrote, "like many of you who have lost a loved one or a grandparent over the pain of this past year, he was my grandpa, master of the barbecue, legend of banter, and cheeky right till the end."
I suppose I spent longer in Whelp than in any other ship.
On the royal family's social media channels today, they marked the Duke of Edinburgh's naval service on board HMS Whelp in the Second World War.
And it took me all the way from Scapa Flow to Tokyo and back again.
Before Prince Philip's death, I caught up with one of the British pilots he rescued.
We were flying over Sumatra and did raids on the oil refineries.
After one such raid, Norman Richardson's plane was hit. He crash-landed into the Pacific Ocean. Philip was First Lieutenant of HMS Whelp.
Were picked up by HMS Whelp and got out and greeted by Prince Philip. "Welcome aboard the Whelp." He was one of the boys.
Norman was 93 when we spoke and has since passed away. He took with him his own memories of Prince Philip on what he told us was a lucky day. Chris Shipp, ITV News.
Well, tributes were also paid to Prince Philip in Parliament today. The session started with a minute's silence. MPs from all parties shared personal anecdotes and stories of their experiences with the Duke.
I know it is in no way comparable, but I know how important it is to have a husband, a partner who is a source of strength and a rock in time of trouble. As a hugely talented person, Prince Philip could have been enormously successful in his own right, but he put his life to ensuring the success of his wife.
It takes a remarkable man to be a leader, but it takes an even more remarkable man to support a woman leader, and that's what Prince Philip did.
Remembering the Duke in Parliament today. Boris Johnson has launched an investigation into how a company linked to David Cameron secured government contracts. It will examine the former Prime Minister's actions while lobbying the Chancellor Rishi Sunak and the Health Secretary Matt Hancock on the firm's behalf. And our political correspondent Carl Dinnan is at Downing Street. Carl, this is looking awkward, isn't it, increasingly for the government?
Yeah, that's right, Mary, especially as Labour are trying to drag the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, to Parliament tomorrow to answer questions about his conversations with David Cameron at a time when Mr Cameron was lobbying or talking to ministers on behalf of this company, Greensill Capital. Now, we already know that Mr Cameron directly approached both Mr Sunak and a couple of other Treasury ministers about trying to get a COVID emergency loan for Greensill. He also set up a meeting between Greensill's boss, Lex Greensill, and the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, as part of a business pitch. But so far, there's no evidence to suggest that any ministers, any serving ministers, have done anything wrong. And Mr Cameron says that he hasn't broken any of the rules around lobbying. But therein lies the problem, because many people feel that those lobbying rules are just far too weak. And ITV News understands that the independent review announced today will be able to consider strengthening the rules around lobbying, especially when it comes to senior ministers like former prime ministers. Although Labour believe that the whole process of this review is in danger of not being transparent enough, especially as transparency itself is one of the problems it's trying to address.
Carl Dinnan and Downing Street, thank you. Shirley Williams, one of the first women cabinet ministers and a high-ranking member of the 1970s Labour government, has died at the age of 90.
To me, the tragedy of this election is that it has been an election between the haves and the have-nots, and I deeply regret the result.
And that was Baroness Williams in 1979. After losing her seat, she later broke away from the party to form the SDP, which later became the Liberal Democrats. Her career as a politician spanned half a century. And finally, for some, before they hit the shops, the first order of the day was to deal with the lockdown locks. Some hair salons opened really early this morning, befitting customers longing to get a crop. Most are fully booked for at least a month, as Stacey Foster found out.
When are you getting your haircut? I don't know. When are you going to get time?
The scissors haven't stopped. Craig and his son Reese are back at the barber's for the first time this year, but there's no easing themselves back in.
Technically, I haven't got anyone's hair since about the 23rd of December. So I'm practicing and I'm getting better today.
That's reassuring, isn't it? To be one of the first in line, Kevin booked online months ago.
Unfortunately, I'm stuck at home with a wife. So it's nice to come in and see these lads and have a nice chat with them.
Is there anything else you're going to be doing?
Of course, I'm going straight to the pub from here with my new haircut.
Stephen's just glad to see the back of his DIY cut.
It's nice to have a professional actually cutting my hair. The wife, bless her, has tried, but to her abilities it's not quite the same, is it?
Morning, everyone. Next in the chair is Paul Cook. Since the barber's closed, he's been in hospital with COVID-19. He was on a ventilator for 6 weeks and his doctors thought he might not make it.
It's been really bad. I've been out of hospital for 3 weeks now. It's just nice to see people, and I can get my hippie locks sorted out. It'd be good.
A few doors down, there's plenty of treatments for locks neglected during the lockdown. Janae's been working in public health throughout the pandemic. She booked today off work especially to see her hairdresser.
Everyone wants to feel nice, so it's nice to be here, and we've been in lockdown. What a nice treat to go out and just, the first thing you do is get your hair done and you feel good.
And that's why this salon is fully booked for weeks.
But I'm expecting a lot of errors because after the last lockdown we had, we had to work some miracles, a lot of treatments and all that kind of stuff that we wouldn't normally do to clients.
With salons closed, many of us have had to embrace our natural hair, but now they're back and working at superhero speed. Stacey Foster, ITV News, Birmingham.
And that's me tomorrow. Tom's here at 10 from me and all the team. Bye-bye.